Welcome to today's episode of Falling to Freedom, where addiction ends and faith begins, the weekly podcast that brings thoughtful, informed, and challenging discussions about addiction to the forefront of everyone's minds. We join our host now, Chad LaComb, for today's topic.
All right, well, welcome. Today we're joined by Jessica Alexander, and she wears a lot of hats. So she is the director of Birth Choice Centers. I believe there's like three of them?
Three.
Yeah,
yes.
Three different ones that you're the director over. And we'll
Two over.
Two, okay.
Two over for right now.
Okay, good. And then we'll get into that. But like I said, you wear a lot of hats. You're also currently a city council member.
Yes.
Right, for Temecula.
Yep.
Maybe the next mayor. We don't know, right?
Lord
You're
willing.
the mayor pro temp right now. So definitely that. You were a Marine, right? I understand you were a Marine. Mm-hmm. New York police officer, a motorcycle cop.
Yep.
Right? And a mother of 5.
Yes.
You're a rock star.
Hardest job is that last one.
Man, you are a rock star. I mean, it's like you're I know you wouldn't describe yourself that way, but you are like a superhero, I think,
thank you.
So it's pretty amazing. And we're really excited to hear, you speak, not only from personal experience, but on our topic for today. And so our topic for today is the intersection of addiction and pregnancy. So that really comes into play with your directing Birth Choice Center, and I know you'll speak about that more in depth. But, the heart behind this podcast is our firm conviction that every single person, has somebody, if not in their immediate family, in their extended family, that has dealt with addiction or is dealing with addiction. And the problem is a lot of times when people are going through it, they think they're the only ones.
Yeah.
Right? We say that addiction is the dirty little secret that every family deals with, but nobody wants to talk about because they think it's just them. And so there's a lot of shame and guilt associated with it, and they don't want to talk about it. But I think it's really important for people to, understand that just because you see something on the outside from someone and they may have everything together and be very successful and doing all of the right things, that doesn't mean they don't have this stuff in their past as well. And so I know you were gracious enough to talk a little bit about that. So I'm just going to turn it over to you. I'm going to stop talking because this is your time and would love to hear, your history in this.
Well, thank you for inviting me first off.
Yeah,
this is an
you're
honor
welcome.
to be able to be here. And no, I definitely do have a history and a past where I could have definitely been on that path as far as for addiction, as far as if you look at my past with my family, not only my mother, also the rest of my mom's side of the family is deeply embedded in addiction with drugs and alcohol and of all different degrees. It's been heartbreaking. It's interesting because I've almost got to see it as an outsider in a sense. For whatever reason, I just believe it was the Lord's protection on me that, I got to see what everybody else was doing, but never really took part in it or never, I might have dabbled in a little bit of maybe drinking here or there, but it was never something.
You were never an addict yourself.
Never.
But surrounded by it with your family. Yeah.
Literally, I almost drowning in it in some ways. But I had a really good opportunity to have mentorship along the way and just wonderful people that I believe the Holy Spirit just really guided me to where I needed to go eventually. But I look back and just thinking about before this podcast, the dangerous situations that as a child I really was led into, and whether being left at night. Well, my family was gambling because my mom, of all of her addiction issues, she just couldn't think clearly and would leave me in a car and, while they were gambling till 6 o'clock in the morning. And I was 16 at the time. Or just the abuse that I had to deal with. I dealt with sexual abuse. I dealt with physical abuse, emotional, verbal. And so I really believe looking at my mom specifically, unfortunately, with what she went through in her addiction, it just destroyed the family in so many ways, her marriage, the children's relationships. And so it took a toll on everybody. But I learned from it. And I think the Lord just pulled me out of that in order to be able to bring me to what I'm doing today and being able to just be a voice for these women and dads also in areas that maybe they're needing help with and somebody to listen to them. So it's an honor.
I think it's interesting that, there's a lot of talk about people that get bound in addiction being a product of their environment, right? Or the house that they grew up in. And I think you're a perfect example that, each person makes their own choices. Yeah, that can affect it, And it can be a negative thing, but it can also, work out the opposite. You were law enforcement. I would imagine that, all of that drama that you were living in probably motivated you to want to go run in the other direction. Is that accurate?
Absolutely. And I think just being protective of people, just knowing what I dealt with, I always wanted to protect kids and just people, just in general in life, who are dealing with these kind of things. I think, like you said, everybody has it somewhere within the family. Again, it doesn't always pop its head up all the time, but it's there. And it just depends on various addictions, like how addicted somebody is. Or is it like every once in a while, or is it really a lot of substance abuse on every day? I've heard so many stories about people leaving their homes and just going out to get drugs and coming back, and family members had no clue what they were even doing. But just dealing with it.
Functioning addict,
literally
functioning alcoholic,
so very interesting, very interesting.
Well, we never would have guessed, looking at you and hearing, all of the accomplishments and all the things you're doing, that that was a part of your past. But I think it's important for people to hear that, because they're not alone. Yeah. Right. And when people start opening up about the things that are going on in their lives, I think they will be surprised to realize there's a lot of people that can relate, maybe not all the particulars, but can relate with what people are going through. And that's really the heart behind this podcast, is opening up that conversation from all different directions and just trying to, address the problem by exposing the problem. Got to, shine light on it.
Absolutely.
Got to shine light on it if you want to really deal with it.
Well, doesn't the enemy love to be able to keep things in the dark, doesn't he?
Absolutely.
So that way, when we talk about these things, it's exposed, and the devil doesn't have his hands so much in that area. And also, you have people being able to pray for you and being able to just walk life with you, knowing what's going on, and so keep you accountable in a sense, which I think is so important. And it's good to have people in our lives like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for sharing, being honest about the things in your past. So tell us about Birth Choice Center. I know you guys have a lot of stuff going on there, but specifically, with this podcast, how addiction, whether it's a young mother, whether it's the father, or maybe both, right? How you see that impacting maybe specifically unwanted pregnancies.
Absolutely. So if I can share a little bit about what Birth Choice is, so maybe for the listeners who don't. Yeah. So we are a pregnancy resource center. As you had mentioned, we have several centers here. We have one in Temecula, Hemet, and Palm Desert. So we have an array of centers where we get to be with a variety of different people, different backgrounds culturally, just on different levels. But again, this is kind of one of those topics, as we're talking about, that stems in every single one of our centers. And over the years, I've been there for about 5 years right now. We see a variety of women coming in with unwanted pregnancies for whatever purpose. It doesn't matter what age they are, what background. Everybody has a possible crisis that's coming in, and that's why they're coming to see us. So we do have a variety of men and women that come in who are addicted, and we have amazing advocates and people who can work with them to be able to get them help that they're needing to work through things. Again, we talked about being able to bring things to light. And a lot of these women and men, sometimes this is the first time they've ever talked to somebody about an addiction, because I truly believe, as we've heard, people walk into our centers and they're like, what is different about this place? And what we know is it's the Holy Spirit.
As opposed to an abortion clinic.
Either. The Holy Spirit is definitely there. And so I think, I know that it gives people just a peaceful feeling when they walk in, and then they're talking with these amazing advocates who are willing to listen, and not everybody wants to listen, and everybody wants the next thing to keep going, but we really want to always honor our time with them and be able to listen to what is bringing them in, because we get it that it's an unwanted pregnancy. But why are they there? And not everybody takes the time to listen to that. And so I think a lot gets opened up during that hour plus, where they know that they're in good hands and that it's going to definitely be confidential, and we're going to love on them no matter what their situation is. So
yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's good. When they come in, you said that there's a high incidence of addiction, with the ladies that come in. Is this something that you recognize through experience? Is it something that they share with you? I mean, how do you determine that?
Yeah, I would say it's both. Again, during our sessions with our clients, they don't always tell us everything. We can see markers, we can see things going on sometimes. Body language, we can smell sometimes the alcohol, or sometimes if they're smoking pot or whatnot. Like sometimes they walk in and our entire foyer area just stinks. Wow. Like you can really smell it. So we have to get to the point when they walk out, very gently and kindly open the doors to air it out, because it could get that like stingent in there, like just potent. But that gives us opportunities. Like these are these windows where we have opportunities to talk to them about, let's talk about what's going on. Because obviously they're doing drugs for a reason. And a lot of people have trauma in their lives. And this is kind of a way to cope with it. And it's a way to mask feelings and emotions. And so we have that opportunity to really sit down and talk with them, because, again, they don't always have somebody to listen to. Sometimes this is the one place that people will actually love on them that they've never seen love before in their lives. So we want to make sure that they know that they're going to be loved no matter what it is. I'm
sure that genuine concern for them really opens people up.
Yeah.
There's a saying, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Absolutely.
Right? So
it's true.
They notice, the care and concern that you have for them. I'm sure it makes them comfortable to open up.
Yeah.
So drug addiction is, I think, by nature a high risk, activity.
Yeah.
So it probably begets other high risk activities.
Yes.
So I would imagine that, there's a high incidence of unplanned pregnancies, right? I mean, they're engaged in the activity, but probably not thinking beyond that moment. And then all of a sudden nature takes over, and now there's a child, coming. And so I would imagine that for some, it's like a rude awakening, and they, want to make the changes necessary that are in the best interest of that child. But then there's probably some that don't, or maybe they just want to continue with what they're doing. So the option for them may just be, they think abortion.
Absolutely.
So how prevalent is that, in the situation, the conversations that you're having?
Definitely. And what was very interesting is, as I wanted to research a little bit more before obviously this podcast, and just really be solid on some of the things I'm saying, which was this morning as I was looking at stuff, one of the things at Birth Choice that we have recognized is when people are in crisis, their frontal lobe actually begins to shut off. And that's where all of their critical thinking is. So I have a woman or a man coming in, it's a crisis pregnancy situation. They can't think clearly. So one of the things that we do is we start pen to paper, because that's how to start critically thinking. And so we get goals and things. But now we bring in somebody with a substance abuse issue that's already starting to destroy the ability for them to think critically anyways. It's even going to be harder. Wow. And if I have somebody that's coming in who is, let's say, it depends where they're at too. Maybe they just got done using in the car before they came in because they're scared to come in. Maybe they're in the process of they're just coming off of their fix, and there's a small window that we get them to actually think clearly. So there's all of these things in play that we have to kind of look at and saying, who is our client? Where are they at? What's going on? And how do we move forward with them depending upon that? And one of the other big areas that we've noticed in the last few years, obviously with fentanyl coming in to our country, one of the other things that we have to be very careful about is, are they coming in after using fentanyl? Because fentanyl's in everything today. And so that's one of our questions is, have you used fentanyl in the last 24 hours? Because unfortunately, I can't allow that to come into our center, because it puts our ladies at risk for if they're touching anything. So we have to be very, very careful. But I'll tell you, we work with anybody and everybody. It's just the one thing is with fentanyl, a lot of times we have to be careful.
Oh yeah, it's so potent, so
it's
deadly.
So potent.
Yeah.
So we have an opportunity, like I said, to just work through these different areas to have them think as clear as possible. And again, it's really hard when they're on some type of substance, because they can't think clearly. So, but again, it's just working with them little by little. Sometimes we have to ask them to come back. And a lot of times we'll just be frank and say, hey, listen, I'm seeing that you're struggling in this area. Are you on something? And we're very open to talking about that, because we never want them to feel shamed. We never want them to feel that they can't be open with us.
Yeah.
So
would Would you, in your experience, would dealing with the addiction issue like drastically reduce the amount of girls that come through your door?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I believe so, because when we have women, whether or not, I'm sure they're enjoying themselves, they go out, let's say for a night, for whatever type of substance they're using, like you would say, they're not thinking clearly. So they're probably and possibly doing things that maybe they wouldn't do if they weren't on some type of substance. It lowers your
inhibitions.
Completely. Right. So, it's hard enough for somebody who's not using. We look at culture today and how sex is very prevalent, and it's a normal part of culture and society. But now add drugs onto that, and now we're dealing with a whole nother bomb on top of it on how we're going to work with her, getting her into some type of treatment. That's the other thing. So that way it keeps her safe, keeps the baby safe. What's going on with dad as well, because we work with dads. So it's making sure that we're working as a unit. I would say one of the biggest things that I love about Birth Choice is so many people look at a pregnancy resource center and go, they're all about the baby. They just want to save the baby. Now, that is very true. We want to be able to save that baby. But when they walk in, she is the most important thing to us. He is the most important thing to us. If I can save him or her, I can save that baby. And so obviously it's through the Lord who does that, but it's just giving them the opportunity to hear and understand that, what their identity is. And once they realize their value and worth, it's a lot different. We're now having a different discussion about who that baby is and that baby's value and worth. So we always want to just give them as much care and love as possible when we're going through times like this. So
absolutely. So you've mentioned a couple of times the father.
Yeah.
I mean, just biology, right?
They have a part to do with it. They're kind of important.
I mean, there's some people who would say, well, you can be artificially inseminated. Okay. It still took a man to create that sperm,
that's right.
So it takes a man and a woman. And I think a lot of times the man is just kind of put to the side, right? But it sounds like from what you're saying that you guys are just as concerned about that father as you are the mother. So want to tell us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So we have what's called the Fatherhood Project. Okay. So we have men that come in, as currently right now, all of them are dads. They don't have to be, who are advocates and volunteers. We have a great team of men, just incredible men that come in to be able to walk life with these guys, to give them a voice. As we're saying, so many times society will shove them aside. And we have found in Birth Choice that when we give men a voice and we let them know that their voice matters, and it has one of the most influential, it's one of the most influential voices in a mother's life, or in a mother's life who is on the verge of trying to decide whether or not to have an abortion. If I recall, I believe it's 64% of women had stated that that they had gone to the dad first for advice on what they want to do. And so many men, because of the toxic masculinity, they will sit there and say, well, your body, your choice. Well, isn't that interesting that they just walk away and just put everything in her basket to be able to make that decision? It's a lot of pressure on a woman. So our thing is empowering men to take up their mantle, to teach them what their role is as a dad, and to be able to be a voice for that child and that mom, whether or not they're married or not, but to be able to show them what family looks like. And so for us, that dad is majorly important. He's probably one of the most important people that we have to be able to reach out to, because we can save families, and we can save babies, and we can save moms so much more if we can continue to get those dads sharpened.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I'm assuming if addiction is involved, it's both of them.
Absolutely.
Right? It's not just the woman there doing drugs by herself. I mean, they're probably doing drugs together.
100%.
So now we enter into a pregnancy. Maybe the mom, is like, wow, I have a child inside of me. I can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
I would imagine that would be the response for a lot of women.
Absolutely.
Doesn't mean the father is going to do that. Maybe the father's like, I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing, and, you do your thing. I mean, is that... in your experience, would that be?
It's so varies, Chad. We get moms like you said who they're pregnant. They're like, oh, I got to keep my body clean and healthy, and and they find ways to at least be clean during that pregnancy. I mean, even things down to smoking. It sounds small, but it's so huge. We talk about every type of those addictions that bring toxins into the body and can really destroy. But we even have dads who are sober who are seeing their wife being destroyed or their girlfriend, and they want a better life for them. And we see where they're both on drugs, and they're concerned about their fourth child being taken away from CPS because they're on drugs. Or I think we're just going to have, I remember we had a client who had several kids. Mom and dad were both using. He was in and out of jail. And they're like, I think we're just going to have an abortion because they already taken away our other 3 kids. And I was like, I was brokenhearted. But I can understand, I have empathy and sympathy sitting from their perspective, that they don't understand, but they just don't want another child out there that they can't take care of. But this is where we get those opportunities to talk to them about adoption and what that looks like. And just the importance of how, having other people be able to speak into a child's life and raise them. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's very hard on a lot of these people when they're in this crisis, and maybe they've been abused before too.
Do you see that a lot?
Yeah, it's very hard. It's a lot of emotions coming out. I don't know if you've ever had anybody on here talking about trauma balls, but when we have
what is it? A trauma ball?
Yeah. So when somebody, let's say, has an experience. Let's say somebody has an experience of childhood trauma, some type of abuse, let's say sexual abuse. What'll happen is we are able to, our brains actually and our bodies are able to enclose that to be able to protect us. And when we continue to have trauma, those trauma balls can be created within our brain. When there's a major crisis like an unplanned pregnancy, there can be an electric, almost like an electric field that goes through it and opens up all of those trauma balls.
Oh, wow.
So now I'm not just dealing with a crisis pregnancy, but I'm dealing with all the past trauma that they're now bringing in that hasn't been like worked on or anything. So when
you see this pretty consistently,
a lot, because we're seeing more and more people come in who are sexually assaulted, who've gone through trauma, who are addicted to drugs and substance abuse, and all this comes out, PTSD. And so we're not just dealing with just, okay, I'm pregnant. We have this time we have to unpack all this sometimes to figure out, how do we move forward with her?
You guys are literally on the front line.
That's exactly it. We are literally on the front line. That's what we say. We pray every day. We're like, Lord, battle us up, put us in our armor, because we really are on so many perspectives of that.
I think people, have a misconception of, pregnancy centers. Is that the correct term? Pregnancy centers?
Pregnancy centers, you got it.
I guess it would be in opposition to abortion centers, right? So a woman is pregnant, probably unplanned. What do I do? Culture says, abort the child.
Yeah.
You guys are saying, don't abort the child. Maybe this is a blessing in disguise. Have the child, or if not, then give it up for adoption, and then dealing with, healing for that person as well, because there's probably a lot of brokenness.
Yeah,
so
there is.
I think that's probably a lot different than what people, imagine goes on.
I think people walk in and they think, oh, they give them a free pregnancy test and ultrasound, and then they're done. And it's like, no, we walk life with these men and women for years. And then what's beautiful is, as we gain their trust and love, they continue to come back. Like we've seen families with kids and kids and kids, and they just keep coming back because we have other resources available for them. So not only tangible things, like for instance, if we have somebody coming in who has an addiction issue, we can bring them to certain resources like You Turn for Christ, or just other areas that can really help them. And if not, we find something that's going to fit their need. But we have so many resources, even tangible resources, that is given by the community to, help them out with these diapers, wipes, formula, food, whatever it is. Yeah. It's a whole nother section that we have. And we have another area. We do over 400 classes with moms and dads that we have. And some of these areas are dealing with substance abuse, and just different areas of their life. And so it's important to be able to have that opportunity to speak into their life if they allow us. And it's an honor, to be honest with you. It really is. So
a term came up that I wasn't really familiar with, prior to the podcast, and it was postpartum effects of addiction. And so I thought that was interesting. Makes sense, right?
Yeah.
If someone is addicted to drugs, they get pregnant. So even if they stop at that moment, there's still drugs in their system. It's probably going to have some kind of an effect. If they continue to use the drugs during the pregnancy, I mean, we all know what that could lead to. Certainly babies addicted to drugs and maybe complications with the pregnancy, miscarriages, probably a whole slew of things. So I thought maybe you could just share from your experience on that.
Yeah, definitely. So, when we look at, just like you had stated, when we look at what is happening when moms and dads are using drugs, we want to look at the side effects. It was one of the things that I started doing some more research on, and we had briefly talked that I thought was interesting, because I was like, well, since it's like a 50-50 thing here, and obviously dad's sperm is important to be healthy, what happens when he's using it? And as you had mentioned, miscarriages, that's one of the things that gets brought up is they're finding that the majority of what happens is there are miscarriages or sometimes developmental disabilities that end up happening later on with some of that. So that's one. But when we look at postpartum, there's a lot of complications that can happen. We look at, again, talking about disabilities, brain development, organs not working correctly. They have more possibilities of issues later on of being sick, addicted to drugs as they come out. That's one of the worst things to ever see as a child, who's addicted and then having to come off of heroin or cocaine or fentanyl, whatever that is, whatever type of drug that they're using. It's very hard. And as we've had opportunities to talk to a lot of foster parents as well, it creates a lot more difficulty as well with trying to raise a child who's coming off of addiction. I've, again, talking about my family, I had my aunt who was addicted to drugs. And I think when she had her daughter at the time, she was on, oh goodness, what do they call it? It was what they usually take after heroin, methadone. Sorry. So she was on methadone for quite a long time while she was pregnant, and her daughter had to come off of, just that whole addiction thing. And
when she was born, she was born addicted to methadone.
Yeah. So it's just heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking. And so, and we get a lot of women who come in. I'll tell you, I've gotten several pregnant women who are homeless. So, a lot of times they really don't want to get off drugs, but trying to teach them these things that can end up happening to their child. And it's scary for them. It's really scary. So when we look at it postpartum, we're looking at, when we say postpartum, it's typically 28 days. And depending upon who you're talking to, it could be up to a year here in the state of California. But it can create a lot of problems, not only physiological problems, social problems later on. We also think about how, as moms and dads are still using after the pregnancy, the problems that it can cause as far as just being able to take care of your child. How is that even possible? We've seen people who, they have no ability to even think, but yet their kid is walking around in a diaper all day that's dirty and nasty, but they're high on drugs, they're shooting up, they're doing their thing, and they're not thinking about their child, they're thinking about their next hit. So just even the safety for that child is really important. And sometimes we've had to call, unfortunately, CPS if we've had to step in where there's a child who's being neglected or even abused to a point, whether it's sexually, whether it's physically. It doesn't happen often, but we have to watch out for that child, and that child at that point in time is really important for us to make sure that they're safe.
Yeah, I think it's important to recognize that with addiction and pregnancy, it's not just the physical stuff. I mean, that's a part of it, but it's also just the relational stuff. So let's say they go through the pregnancy and there aren't any physical effects or, anything negative that happened to the child. But if they're still using drugs, they're going to be in that mindset, which is addiction is very selfish.
Yeah.
It's very selfish. It's very self-centered. Parenting has to be the opposite.
Everything but
everything
like
but
sacrifice.
You. Exactly. I mean, you have 5 children. It's like you've had no life, right?
I still don't.
You've had no life since you started having children, because it's all about the children, as it should be, right? And you're, looking out for their well-being and making sure that they're raised properly and educated. I mean, all these things that go into it, loving and nurturing, is like the opposite of what an addict is going to be thinking about.
Exactly.
Right? They're going to be thinking about themselves. So I mean, we can just see the effects of that, on that child.
It's interesting. Like, it's hard enough to raise children sober-minded, and then adding something else into that, I couldn't even imagine, and going back to seeing kind of me on that other perspective, as we were kind of talking about before, about seeing my mom have to go through that. So she was addicted to, cocaine and dealing. There was a lot growing up, but then it moved into prescription drugs where she would be doing 24 Vicodin a day on top of ups and downers. Like, and I am watching that, and the interaction that it had, and the destruction of the family, because it's like you walk in and you go, what am I dealing with today? What kind of parent, who am I seeing today? Am I seeing nice
very
mom?
Unpredictable.
Yeah, it's very hard. And so even for kids being raised in an environment like that, it's heartbreaking. It's challenging. Seeing marriages break up because of it. It's unbelievable how much it can destroy a family. It really, really can. And it's hard to watch. But again, we have this opportunity to just be able to speak love and life into these families that are needing it. So it's a great position to be in. Honestly, I love being on the front line. I'll do it all day. Do it all day. Yeah.
It seems that maybe not 100%, but a lot of times there's a lot of brokenness that goes with, addictive lifestyles, right? Not just a little bit of substance use or partying, but I think the clinical term now is substance use disorder, which they classify as, somebody that's using repeatedly and neglecting their responsibilities and negative effects from it, from all these, clinical definitions. But it seems that, a lot of times that it's associated with, like you said, trauma or brokenness. So,
right.
The fact that you guys are focusing on that is pretty amazing.
Well, talking about the compound trauma, like we talked about the trauma balls, right? But what it looks like is it's compound trauma. And when you have an individual who comes in, so they're traumatized from the past, now they're using some type of substance to be able to mask that. And now they're pregnant with an unwanted pregnancy. And let's say she or he decide to have an abortion. Well, now you have more trauma onto that, because now you're really destroying another life. And they don't understand sometimes what they're doing to themselves, because the impact that has on later on their lives is even more destructive, to where they can go even into a worse position than what they're in. And so, a lot of people that come in and they're like, well, it's a one and done. We're good. I just want to go back to my life. And they don't realize that it actually sends them spinning even deeper into heartache and trauma that normally will lead them to substance abuse.
That's not said enough.
Yeah.
Obviously, the people that are promoting that option don't want to say that.
Yes.
Because then people would probably think twice. It just made me think, do you have ladies or couples where they come in and previously they had an abortion?
Yes.
And now they're like, I don't want to do that again.
Yes.
What are my options? Do you find that? It just made me think of it when you said that. I'm like, oh my gosh. Yeah, somebody that might have already had an abortion still engaged in that high-risk behavior, and they're like, it's not just, like you said, a one and done. There's baggage that comes with that, and I don't want to deal with that again.
We see it all, Chad. I mean, we've had girls come in 12, 17 abortions. Like, it's nothing. Like, it's nothing. And then we have girls who've had one abortion, and they're destroyed on what happened. It's incredible to see how girls come in sometimes. If I can just share this, we had one lady, this was before my time, but this is kind of one of those things that has been passed on. Right before I came, there was a high school student that came in, and she found out she was pregnant right before prom. And she's sitting there on social media and basically putting it out there. I'm pregnant. What should I do? And she did like some type of survey if she should have an abortion or not, like right there. And she basically told the advocates at that time, well, I just don't want to have a baby bump for prom. So, like, we see this, the kind of just the craziness of how could you even think about that? Like, you're thinking about, again, self-centeredness. And then we have some people that come in and they realize what they did and they just need help. So we do have what's called it's a grief and loss class that helps moms and dads. We have classes separate for each to be able to go through the process of what ended up happening through the abortion, whether it was 1, 2, 5. We have women who come in their 80s who are like, hey, I had an abortion when I was in my 20s. And they go through it. It's a 7-week course. I'll be honest with you, since we're
60 years later, and they're still dealing with that.
Yeah, and if just to be honest, I was one of those. I was 20 years old and had my abortion, and I never really realized the destruction it had on my life. It was one of those like, okay, I did it. Don't remember a whole lot, but it kept resurfacing and resurfacing. And about when I started Birth Choice, one of the things, if you've had an abortion, you have to go through the grief and loss class, the healing class. And it was the most incredible thing I've ever done for my life, because it sent me on an entire different trajectory than I would have ever thought. I thought I was coming in to do a couple volunteer hours. I had my own business. I'm like, oh, I could do this on my own and just on my own time and have fun. And the Lord said, oh no, daughter, I have a whole nother plan for you. And so when I went through it, it was incredible, the healing that went through it. And now I get to use it as my testimony. It's ashes out of beauty, ashes to beauty.
Yeah.
So.
And that's available, that class, like to
anybody.
I mean, they don't have to be a pregnant mom to come in and access the resources. If someone listening to this was dealing with the trauma from an abortion, they could come in and take that class.
Yeah. Yeah.
Are there
and it's free.
Are there other centers, or is it online at all, or is it just in person?
I'm sure we don't do it online. We do have, I'll tell you, the one-on-one is so important. I think just like anything, just having that accountability, just having that openness. It's great to, if you have nothing else, then, I'm sure there are centers that do that.
I'm just thinking for people that might be listening that don't live in this valley.
Yeah.
Is this something that as you've collaborated with other pregnancy centers, is this something that they also have?
This is nationwide, these types of classes. So one of the areas that they can look into is called CareNet. CareNet is a overall arching kind of umbrella over all the pregnancy resource centers that helps us with curriculum, helps us with different things that really guides our classes in a sense. And they are biblical. They're 7 weeks of biblical classes for men and women. But it goes through all the trauma. Remember all those trauma balls and that compound trauma we talked about? It really begins to unwind all that and goes through grief and loss and anger and all of this to finally get to the point where we begin to be healed internally. The vision I was given initially, God had showed me when I was going through this myself. He says, you're forgiven, daughter. And he gave me a vision of a bad seed. And the seed that grew, the tree was it was cut off and there was forgiveness. But was there any healing and anything that, and the working that God had to do through me and with me and in me through the roots and clean all that up? And then it was like he poured his love into it, and it's like almost like a scar that was there. But it's part of the testimony that's like, let me tell you about this scar. Let me tell you about my past. But what God did through it is just incredible. And we have so many of our volunteers that actually have gone through that as well. So they have that opportunity to talk. And we have an array of women who come in, I have one lady, she's an incredible volunteer, and her testimony with drugs and her past is just incredible on how she can come and minister to these women and men. So we have, and what's the best part, what I love honestly, is God sets up like these divine appointments all the time. Exactly who is coming in. God just sets up somebody who is ready to talk to them is in their past. We don't even realize it, but they're in that room and she's just able to minister to them to exactly what they're needing every time. I just love watching it. So it's really neat.
That is. So you mentioned, I think you said CareNet.
Yes.
Kind of, that allows me just, as we close, to segue into solutions or options. So very high likelihood that somebody, a young lady is listening to this podcast, or even a young man, or somebody that is dealing with a pregnancy. Maybe they're addicted to drugs. What options are out there for them? Obviously, if they're here in Temecula Valley, Temecula, Murrieta, Menifee, in this area, birth choice centers would be an excellent option. But
for sure,
if they're not, what would your advice be? Maybe not a specific thing. CareNet might be something, but if not a specific thing, what would your advice be to someone that's dealing with this?
If I have a woman or a man that comes in, or just in their situation, let's say that they're at home and they're listening to this, I would just encourage them to get the help that they're needing, as scary as it can be sometimes. Sometimes we don't want, I think we said it earlier, you don't want everybody to know your deepest, darkest secrets. Mm-hmm. And there are people like at Birth Choice and other areas and ministries and organizations that just do an incredible job to walk life through with people. I was doing a class the other day teaching our volunteers. And I don't know if you remember the movie Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
And there's this part in there where he comes up to this like cavern and it's empty. And he has to take a leap of faith and see if something's going to be caught underneath. And for me, everything I do, and I encourage people, like sometimes we just have to take that step, mm-hmm. even though we don't know the outcome. We don't know what's going to come underneath us. But if we just take a leap of faith and just trust, and for me especially, it's in the Lord, mm-hmm. just knowing that he's going to take care of me and his kids. And mm-hmm. it's going to be incredible. And there's going to be protection there. So I would encourage people to just get out, speak to somebody that they can trust. Mm-hmm. If they're pregnant, find a pregnancy resource center. Birth Choice is amazing, don't mistake me, but I know that there are other really wonderful.
So if somebody were to if you were to encourage somebody, what would they Google? What would be the
Pregnancy Resource Center?
Pregnancy Resource Center.
Not Planned Parenthood. Okay, if you're listening, not Planned Parenthood.
Right. Pregnancy. So if you Google Pregnancy Resource Center,
yes,
then typically in my area, then it should bring up, places like Birth Choice Center and
absolutely
in their area.
100%.
Right.
100%.
We did an interview with a woman who runs one in Fontana.
Okay.
So,
yes.
Cherish Young Mothers. So I'm sure they're everywhere, these resources. So
they are. There's not a lot, and I'll be honest with you, I didn't even know about a pregnancy resource center until probably about 5 years ago, before I started working here. I had mm-hmm. seen one at church. They came, and my first time ever seeing him, and I kind of forgot about it. And then this opportunity opened up, and I was encouraged. There's a lot of these.
Now you're directing.
And now I'm directing. I am. And it's great.
Yeah,
it's not even work for me. I get to spend life with the most incredible people that walk in our centers every day. I just love on them.
That's awesome. And one more time, what was the website that you mentioned?
Yes. So if, for donors.
For trauma.
For trauma. Sorry, go ahead. I just got lost there for a second.
For the trauma, you mentioned about like the classes and stuff.
For us, yes.
No, you said it was a nationwide.
CareNet.
CareNet.
Sorry, I'm thinking we're
good. That's okay. CareNet.
So CareNet is wonderful, but they're kind of the overall resource. But if they look into grief and loss class, they can. What is the other one? I'm just blanking right now on the name of it, but just look up grief and loss class for pregnancy, or just for abortion, and they have tons of them everywhere. Okay. So there are different levels of them. Sometimes they're weekend retreats. Sometimes they're just elongated throughout a couple weeks. And if I can encourage everybody here, a lot of times doing these classes over several weeks or months is the best way to do it, because it gets time for you to process. And through each week, we see our girls once a week, and it gives them time to work through those areas, work through their homework, pray on things, and be able to see how God is working in their lives during that time, rather than sometimes a weekend retreat where it's really intense. Not saying that it's bad, but over longer periods of time, I've noticed is really, really great and really encouraging to help out and walk that time with them. So
cool. Well, Jessica, Birth Choice Centers, Temecula, we really appreciate you coming on, spending this time and sharing with us. So thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate you for having us.
All right.
Thank you for being a part of this much-needed conversation as we expose the raw truths about addiction. Don't forget to like, follow, and most importantly, share. Remember, addiction is the dirty little secret that every family deals with, but nobody wants to talk about.